Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala amma ba'd. Ayyuha al-ikhwa wal-akhawat, respected brothers and sisters in Islam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we seek His divine aid, we seek His assistance. For whomsoever Allah Azza wa Jal guides, none can misguide, and whomsoever Allah Azza wa Jal misguides, none can guide. I bear witness that none is right to be worshipped except Allah Azza wa Jal alone, without any partner, and I testify that the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam is his final prophet and messenger. As for proceeded, inshaAllah, we continue our reading of the beneficial Risala, the treatise titled Al-Wasa'il Al-Mufida Lil-Hayati Sa'ida, the beneficial means to leading a happy life, written by the great scholar of the last century, one of the major scholars of the last century, Shaykh Abdul Rahman ibn Nasir As-Sa'idi rahimahullah ta'ala. And by now the story behind the Shaykh authoring this treatise, it is well known that the Shaykh read a book titled Da'il Qalaq wa Abda'il Hayat, Stop Worrying and Start Living, authored by the American author Dale Carnegie, and he benefited tremendously from this book, and he felt that the Muslims could benefit from such a work, and so he summarized it, and he authored this beneficial treatise titled The Beneficial Means to Leading a Happy Life. And so in this Risala, the Shaykh discusses three means how we go about achieving a happy life. And he says the first foundation of achieving eternal happiness in dunya and in akhirah, it is through al-iman wa amalus salih. It is through true belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and engaging in righteous deeds. Man amila salihan min dhakarin aw untha wa huwa mu'minun falanuhyiyannahu hayatan tayyibah. The promise of Allah Azza wa Jal, that whosoever believes in Allah Azza wa Jal and works righteous actions while they are believing servants of Allah, Allah promises He will give them a happy life. He will give them a happy life. And so this is the first foundation which the Shaykh discusses, whereby a person obtains a happy life, and that is through the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he mentions that there are some natural means whereby people go about achieving happiness, and that is through the natural means, meaning the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created them. The intrinsic nature is such that they are happy and joyful people, and so they tap into this resource and they achieve happiness. The third way the Shaykh discusses how we go about achieving happiness is by way of practical means which each and every single human being has at their disposal, and these means it can be learned, and once it is learned, it can be implemented practically to achieve a happy life. And what we really need to understand is that Islam has a lot to say about achieving happiness and well-being. Islam has a lot to say about achieving happiness and a state of well-being. In fact, a scholar mentioned the reason behind the legislation of the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is for a specific purpose. That's the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited certain matters upon us, and the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to do certain actions and deeds, it is for a specific purpose. And he mentioned أنزل الله عز وجل الشرائع لتحصيل المنافع وتعظيمها ودرء المفاسد وتقليلها في العاجل والآجل. He said that Allah Azza wa Jal revealed the Sharia, He revealed the Quran and the Sunnah لتحصيل المنافع, for the sake of obtaining benefit, وتعظيمها, and maximizing these benefits. And from amongst these benefits which is obtained, it is happiness. Happiness is a natural outcome for the one who fulfills his purpose of existence. وَمَا خَلَقَتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I've not created jinkind and mankind except to worship me. So when a person fulfills his reason for existence, naturally he will be happy. And so this is the reason why the Sharia was revealed. He also mentions وَدَرْءِ الْمَفَاسِدِ وَتَقْلِيلِهَا فِي الْعَاجِلِ وَالْآجِلِ. He also says it has also been revealed to ward off al-mafasid, to ward off harm, وَتَقْلِيلِهَا, and to minimize the effects of harm, فِي الْعَاجِلِ وَالْآجِلِ, both in short term and long term. And so part of warding off evil is sorrow and grief, anxiety, depression. And so this is one of the goals and the objectives of the Sharia, is that Allah Azza wa Jal wants us to be happy, and He does not want us to be sad. And so this is one of the wisdoms behind the revelation being revealed. So Shaykh Abdul Rahman, he mentions these three main methods, and he expounds upon them. And we've reached the chapter where Shaykh Abdul Rahman mentions the most beneficial means as how a person goes about removing al-qalaq, which is anxiety, wal-humum, and distress and sorrow, إذا حصل على العبد من النكبات, when the person is faced with a calamity. So this is when the calamity actually strikes. How a person goes about removing anxiety, and this is about future events. How a person goes about removing anxiety and distress when the calamity first strikes. And so a believer, as a Muslim, we must accept that this world, it is an abode of test. This world is an abode of test. It is Darul Imtihan. It is the abode of test. And we must also accept that this life of this world is not our final abode. It is not the place wherein we will abide forever. It is, as they refer to in Arabic, they say it is Darul Mamar. It is something which we pass through. And we also have to accept that this dunya is faniya, that this dunya, it will come to an end. We will not live eternally in the dunya. So if a believer accepts this fact, he must accept that he will be trialed and he will be tested. He will be trialed and he will be tested, and he will be afflicted with some form of difficulty in the life of this world. And after he takes towards the means which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated for us when we go through difficulty, as Allah says, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ, that seek the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through patience and salah. You combine between patience and your prayer. Thereafter, the person must take a proactive approach, and he must take towards whatever other means helps to remove the difficulty. Either to remove the difficulty from its very root, to lighten the burden of the difficulty, or to busy himself with something which will take him away from being preoccupied with that difficulty. And so, for example, a person must take towards the means of obtaining what he sets out to obtain. The person must take the prescribed means, because as Muslims we don't believe that Allah Azza wa Jal sends things down from the sama. The system of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the life of this world is that you must take towards the prescribed means which Allah Azza wa Jal has legislated for us in order to achieve our goals and our objectives. So the person must be proactive in removing it. So for example, a person is faced with some form of loss of wealth and poverty, and so the person must make an active effort to seek halal rizq. He must make effort to seek halal rizq. He must put himself out there. He must promote his talent, and so on and so forth, in order to obtain a job, and in order to remove this difficulty that he finds himself in. Another example of this is a person who is trialed with some form of illness. Can he just sit back and expect that Allah Azza wa Jall's decree overtakes him? No, the person must be proactive in trying to get cured. So if that means he must go to a doctor and a doctor prescribes medication for him in order to be cured, then that is the means that he must take. Of course, he does this while placing his trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And by this, he can possibly remove the difficulty he finds himself in. If this is not possible, he seeks means to lighten it and to make that calamity easier. And if this doesn't work, he busies himself on becoming preoccupied with the difficulty which he currently experiences. And so Shaykh Abdul Rahman mentions, وَمِنْ أَنْفَعِ الْأَسْبَابِ زَوَالِ الْقَلَقِ وَالْهُمُومِ إِذَا حَصَلَ عَلَى الْعَبْدِ مِنَ النَّكَبَاتِ أن يسعى في تخفيفها بأن يقدر أسوأ الاحتمالات التي ينتهي إليها الأمر. He mentions that amongst the most beneficial means of removing anxiety and distress when the calamity strikes is that a person must strive to lighten the difficulty. So the calamity strikes. What you now do is you strive to lighten that calamity. How is this achieved? He says, بأن يقدر أسوأ الاحتمالات التي ينتهي إليها الأمر. He mentions that a person must consider the worst possibility and the worst outcome which this calamity could have reached. So the calamity strikes. The person now must think of the worst possible outcome this calamity could have reached. And so a person is trialed with regard to some aspect of his worldly life. He's trialed with some aspect of his worldly life. Loss of wealth, loss of a loved one, and so on and so forth. And so he looks at someone who was trialed in his dunya. He looks at someone who was trialed, rather he looks at someone who was trialed in his deen. And so he considers the difficulty that he goes through light in terms of the one who loses his deen when he goes through a calamity. And so the person finds that his iman is still intact and his iman is still sound. And so this causes the person to see the calamity that he experiences as something which is light. It causes him to see the calamity that he goes through as something which is light. So the person must consider the worst possible outcome which could have happened. Another scholar, he gives a more extreme example. A person receives a phone call and he is informed that his family was in a fatal accident. He has 5 sons and they were all in this accident. What he must bring to mind is the fact that the possibility exists that all 5 sons have passed on. However, news reaches him later that the 4 of his sons are in critical condition and 1 has passed on. So he must consider the worst possible outcome, that all of them died in this accident. And then when he realizes that only 1 died and 4 is alive, this causes him to see the loss as something like, may Allah Azza wa Jal protect us. So this is the first method he says a person must adopt, that he must consider the worst possible outcome which could have occurred. And the reality is that that outcome did not take place. Secondly, he mentions وَيُوَطِّنُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ نَفْسَهُ. Secondly, you should also try to put up with the situation physically and mentally. We mentioned that as a believer, this world, it is a place of imtihan, it is a place of test. And so you must ready yourself to put up with challenges and difficulties. وَيُوَطِّنُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ نَفْسَهُ. That he must ready himself to put up with the difficulties in the life of this world, mentally and physically. فإذا فعل ذلك فليسعى إلى تخفيف ما يمكن تخفيفه بحسب الإمكان. And when he does this, he strives, or he should strive, to lighten the difficulty according his ability. فبهذا التوطين وبهذا السعي النافي تزول همومه وغمومه. And he mentions فبهذا التوطين, by trying to put up with the difficulty, وبهذا السعي النافي, and also by striving to lighten the burden, he says the person's hum, the person's sorrow, والغم, and the person's grief, it will be lifted. Why? Because the person has taken an active approach to try to lessen the burden of the difficulty, rather than just sitting back and being in a state of depression and sadness and not taking any proactive measures to better the situation. And so he mentioned when the person does this, this will cause the person's grief and sorrow to be lifted. ويكون بدل ذلك السعي في جلب المنافع وفي دفع المضار الميسورة للعبد. And he says that the person would have used his energy with regards to obtaining some form of benefit and averting harm and evil, which was easy for him to achieve according his own physical capacity. The Shaykh then mentions فإذا حلت به أسباب الخوف وأسباب الأسقام وأسباب الفقر والعدم لما يحبه من المحبوبات المتنوعة فليتلقى ذلك بطمأنينة وتوطين للنفس عليها. So he mentions, so if some dreadful things occur, فإذا حلت به أسباب الخوف, so when some dreadful things occur, events of fear, وأسباب الأسقام, and situations of illness, وأسباب الفقر, and the person is trialed with some form of poverty, and والعدم, deprivation of what he likes, of the various things of which he likes, you find that he is deprived from it. He says فليتلقى ذلك بطمأنينة وتوطين للنفس عليها. He mentions that the person should rise up to situations like this and accept it with contentment, and they must try to put up with it to the best of their ability. And so this comes back to a point which we mentioned previously, that Allah Azza wa Jal, He placed us in the life of this world to be tested. Allah Azza wa Jal placed us in the life of this world to be tested. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this to us in the opening verses of Surah Al-Ankabut, where He subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Alif Lam Mim أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون ولقد فتنا الذين من قبلهم فليعلمن الله الذين صدقوا وليعلمن الكاذبين. Allah mentions Alif Lam Mim أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا. Does man think that they will be left just because they have said آمنا, just because they have said we believe, and now mashallah you will enter Jannah? Allah mentions وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّا الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ, that Allah Azza wa Jal has tested those who came before them, that Allah Azza wa Jal tested the nations which came before us. For what reason? فَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا وَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ الْكَاذِبِينَ. So that Allah Azza wa Jal will come to know those whom are truthful with regards to their claim that they believe, and who are those who are the liars. So Allah Azza wa Jal placed us in the life of this world to be tested with some form of difficulty, and happiness and calamities are both tests from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And our happiness does not mean we will not be trialed, that we will not be tested with some form of grief and some form of sorrow. If this was the case, then the best of creation, خير خلق الله Muhammad ibn Abdullah, he would have been the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who lived a life which would have been free from trial. But yet the Prophet Muhammad was from amongst the most severely tested prophets. The Prophet Muhammad himself said, أشد الناس بلاء الأنبياء ثم الأمثل فالأمثل. He says, alayhi salatu wasalam, that the most severely tested of people are the prophets and those who resemble them in Iman, and then those who resemble them. So those who are closest to the prophets will be tested with much more difficulty than the average Muslim. And a person will be tested according to his Iman. Allah Azza wa Jalla will test a person according to his Iman. So the higher the Iman, the more challenges you will face. The more challenges you will face. And so being tested with some form of fear and some form of illness and some form of poverty is a reality that we all will face. It's a reality that we all will face. However, how we approach these challenging situations will determine whether we will be happy or whether we will be sad. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, we mentioned that he was amongst the most severely tested of people. But the Prophet ﷺ was also given the name of Al-Mutawakkil. One of the Prophet ﷺ's many nicknames was Al-Mutawakkil. And this nickname actually describes the Prophet ﷺ. And that means that he was someone who always placed his trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ faced what he faced. In his 23 years of establishing Nubuwwah, in his 23 years of establishing prophethood, he was driven out from his home, he was mocked at, he was called various names. He was driven from his homeland. He was stoned for the sake of calling towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But all these events, when he went through it, did he just submit and sit down and not take active measures? No, he took active measures, and throughout this entire time he placed his trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah Azza wa Jal will get him through these difficulties. At the end of the Prophet's call, after 23 years, we find that the entire Arabian Peninsula enters into Al-Islam. And the victory is for who? The victory is for Islam and the Muslims. And the Prophet ﷺ witnesses this at the end of his life. So the Prophet ﷺ faced adversity and difficulty, but he did not submit to these difficulties, and he did not let it get him down. He was proactive in trying to change the situations which he went through, alayhi salatu wassalam. So Shaykh Abdul Rahman mentions, فَلْيَتَلَقَّى ذَلِكَ بِتُمَأْنِينَةٍ وَتَوْطِينٍ لِلنَّفْسِ عَلَيْهَا. So the person must meet these types of challenges with contentment. Must be pleased with the situation, that this is what Allah Azza wa Jalla has chosen for him. Then secondly, وَتَوْطِينٍ لِلنَّفْسِ عَلَيْهَا. Then the person must try to put up with this difficulty. بل على أشد ما يمكن منها فإن توطين النفس على الاحتمال المكاري يهونها ويزيل شدتها. In fact, he says that the person must try to put up with something which is even more difficult than the situation which he experiences. For what reason? He says because preparing oneself to mentally put up with situations of difficulty, يهونها ويزيل شدتها. It lessens the burden of the difficulty, ويزيل شدتها, and it removes the difficult nature of that difficulty. So it lessens the burden, or it removes the burden from the very root. وخصوصا إذا أشغل نفسه بمدافعتها بحسب مقدوره. Especially when the person busies himself with trying to better the situation according to his ability, rather than just submitting to the situation. He then mentions, فيجتمع في حقه توطين النفس مع السعي النافع الذي يشغل عن الاهتمام بالمصائب. And so this person, he gathers between trying to put up with the situation and he physically strives to better the situation, and this busies himself from becoming preoccupied with the calamity. That if you don't take action when you are faced with a challenge, that difficulty, it will consume you. That difficulty, it will consume you, and you'll become preoccupied with that difficulty. And no matter how much you try to forget about that difficulty, if you don't take any action, that difficulty will consume you, and everywhere you look, you will only see that difficulty. You will only see that difficulty. He then mentions وَيُجَاهِدُ نَفْسَهُ عَلَى تَجْدِيدِ قُوَّةِ الْمُقَاوِمَةِ لِلْمَكَارِ. And he should also strive against himself. He must strive against himself to renew his energy to encounter difficult situations and to deal with a difficult situation. Because when a person becomes preoccupied with difficulties, it can cause stress, and stress really saps your energy. It saps your energy. So the person must strive against himself to renew his energy to deal and to put up with this difficulty which he faces. During all of this time, the person has dependence upon Allah. He mentions مَعِ اعتماده في ذلك على الله وحسن ثقة به. During all this time, the person has absolute dependence upon Allah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed the situation for me. And Allah Azza wa Jal does not burden a soul beyond its capacity. Allah Azza wa Jal brought me here, and Allah Azza wa Jal will make a way out for me. So the person, he has absolute dependence upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, while he takes towards the means of removing this difficulty, as well as having sincere trust in Allah. He has husnu thiqa bihi. He has sincere trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah Azza wa Jal will make a way out for him from this difficulty. He then mentions وَلَا رَيْبَ أَنَّ لِهَذِي الْأُمُورِ فَائِدَةُ الْأُذْمَى فِي حُصُولِ السُّرُورِ وَانْشِرَاحِ الصُّدُورِ. And he mentions that there is no doubt that this approach with regards to facing difficulties, therein is a great benefit. Therein is a great benefit with regards to obtaining happiness and obtaining satisfaction of the heart. انشراح الصدور مع ما يؤمله العبد من الثواب العاجل والآجل وهذا مشاهد مجرب ووقائه ممن جربه كثيرة جدا. And he mentions that the abd, when he goes through this, he also anticipates and hopes for from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he hopes for a reward, right? A reward in the life of this world and a reward in the year after. وَهَذَا مُشَاهَدٌ مُجَرَّبٌ. And he mentioned that this is something which is known by human experience, and its occurrences of those who have experienced this are many. Like the example we gave of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, who was proactive with regards to trying to change the difficult situation which he found himself in. And this is the reality with regards to any challenge which a person faces. That usually when a person wants to embark upon a new project, or he wants to achieve some goal, what holds him back? What holds him back? His fear holds him back. And this fear consumes the person. And so because the person thinks about the outcome of this goal, and it could be a positive one or it could be a negative one, the person is held back by the thoughts that this goal he wants to achieve, it will have a negative outcome, meaning he won't achieve his goal. And so the person doesn't embark upon trying to achieve his goals. And this goes back to what a scholar has mentioned, where he said, Man haba khaba. Whosoever fears to approach a situation, he will always lose. The person who fears to take on challenges will always lose, because he didn't attempt it and he never really knows the outcome. So the person always loses. And he mentions وَمَنْ أَقْدَمَ أَصَابَ, and whomsoever takes a step forward and he challenges his fear, so to say, asaba, most times he achieves what he intends. He achieves what he intends, because he makes an effort to achieve it. And so the scholars mentioned, he said, man haba khaba, whomsoever fears to take on challenges will always lose. وَمَنْ أَقْدَمَ أَصَابَ, and whomsoever takes a step forward and he tries to achieve what he sets out for, then he will achieve bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next chapter Shaykh Abdul Rahman brings is the chapter relating to the greatest forms of cure. The chapter relating to the greatest forms of cure. He mentions في أعظم العلاجات لأمراض القلب العصبية والأمراض البدنية. He mentions the greatest cure for the person who faces diseases of the heart, and this here refers to mental illnesses, لأمراض القلب العصبية, mental illnesses, والأمراض البدنية, as well as physical diseases. One of the greatest cures and the greatest medications he will mention to us over here. And this section deals with an individual who lets his negative thoughts overpower him. He lets his negative thoughts and his negative thinking patterns overpower him. So the person is in a state of afiyah. The person currently is in a state of well-being, but the person fails to recognize this, and the person becomes preoccupied with his negative thoughts, and so he thinks of illnesses even though he is healthy. Alhamdulillah, he thinks about illnesses, and he thinks about his family members who have passed on, and they've all passed on from similar diseases, and so he becomes preoccupied with the thought that he will also be afflicted with this disease and he will die just like they died due to the same causes. And so he becomes preoccupied with this even though he's in a state of afiyah. Another example is of a person who constantly thinks of being overcome, right? He constantly thinks of being overcome by an enemy, right? And this is his constant thoughts. Even though there is no enemy which is known to him, he thinks of becoming overpowered by an enemy. Or the person, he becomes preoccupied with the thoughts of facing poverty one day. Even though, mashallah, he has a good life and he has a good job and he's earning, he becomes preoccupied with the idea of poverty in the future. And so this is the example of the individual who lets his negative thoughts overpower him. And so Shaykh Abdul Rahman mentions here, he says, وَمِنْ أَعْظَمِ الْعِلَاجَاتِ لِأَمْرَاضِ الْقَلْبِ الْعَصَبِيَّةِ فَالْأَيْضًا لِلْأَمْرَاضِ الْبَدَنِيَّةِ قُوَّةُ الْقَلْبِ وَعَدَمُ إِنْزِعَاجِهِ وَانْفِعَالِهِ لِلْأَوْهَامِ وَالْخَيَالَاتِ الَّتِي تَجْلِبُهَا الْأَفْكَارُ السَّيِّئَةِ. He says that the greatest forms of ilaj, of cure, for mental illnesses, diseases of the heart, literally he says, but what he refers to here is mental illnesses. بل أيضا للأمراض البدنية. He says rather for physical ailments as well. He says it is قوة القلب. It is the strength and the firmness of one's heart. The strength and the firmness of one's heart. We know that the Deen of Islam is a religion that places tremendous importance on the soundness of the heart. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ mentions to us, ألا وإن في الجسد مضغة إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله ألا وهي القلب, which is seen to be Malikul A'da, which is the owner of the limbs. The Prophet says, lo and behold, in this body there is a piece of flesh. If it is sound, the entire body is sound. And if it is corrupted, the entire body will be corrupted. And it is the heart. It is the heart. And so, if the heart is sound, each and everything which emanates from it will be sound as well. The person's limbs will be sound, meaning the person will act in the obedience of Allah. The person's tongue will be sound. The person will not mention things which displease Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is when the heart is sound. This is when the heart is sound. Another hadith which speaks about the strength of the heart is the hadith wherein the Prophet Muhammad also mentions, Al-mu'minu al-qawiyyu khayrun wa ahabbu ila Allahi min al-mu'mini al-da'if. That the strong believer is khayrun, is better, wa ahabbu, and more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the weak believer. So what strength does this refer to? Does it refer to physical strength? What strength does it refer to? It refers to strength of the heart, and that is strength of al-iman. So when the heart is sound and the heart is firm, he mentions وَعَدَمُ إِنْزِعَاجِهِ وَانْفِعَالِ لِلْأَوْهَامِ, and the heart does not become troubled by al-awham. Awham is illusions. وَالْخَيَالَاتِ, and imaginations. التي تجلبها الأفكار السيئة, which come about as a result of negative thinking. Like we gave examples of this person who becomes preoccupied with his negative thoughts of events which have not yet happened. And the person, he becomes preoccupied with this to the extent where he deems this situations to be real. To be real even though they are imaginary. And this comes about as a result of negative thinking. And so he mentions لأن الإنسان متى استسلم للخيالات وانفعل قلبه للمؤثرات. He says, because when a person submits himself to his imagination, he submits himself to his imagination, وانفعل قلبه للمؤثرات, and he allows his heart to become troubled by events of fear which he fears in the future, من الأمراض, events which he fears in the future, such as illnesses, وغيرها, and other than that, such as poverty and being overcome by an enemy. ومن الغضب والتشوش من الأسباب المؤلمة, and he becomes angry at this, and it causes him to become confused due to these difficult situations. ومن توقع حدوث المكار وزوال المحاب أوقعه ذلك في الهموم والغموم. He mentions, and the person also anticipates, and he has anxieties with regards to future events of difficulty and removal of those things which he loves. أوقعه ذلك في الهموم والغموم. He mentions, then this will lead him to grief and sorrow. This will lead him to grief and sorrow. When he thinks about future events which have not yet transpired and which is not a reality, this will lead him to grief and sorrow and will lead him to depression. He mentions وَالْأَمْرَاض الْقَلْبِيَّة وَالْبَدَنِيَّة. It will also give rise to emotional pains. It will give rise to emotional pains and mental illnesses as well as physical illnesses. Right, as I say, stress kills. And this is the relationship that he is showing us here is between the mind and the body. Right? If the heart is sound, then the body will also be sound. And he says the end result of this is وانهيار العصب الذي له آثار سيئة التي قد شاهد الناس مضارها الكثيرة. And he mentions the end outcome of this is that the person will suffer a nervous breakdown. الذي له آثار سيئة التي قد شاهد الناس مضارها كثيرة. He mentions, and the evil effects which people have witnessed. People have witnessed the many harmful effects of this. And this is all of a result of the person falling prey to his negative way of thinking and submitting to it. And so the Shaykh then gives us an alternative to this, and he says, وَمَتَى اعْتَمَدَ الْقَلْبُ عَلَى اللَّهِ وَتَوَكَّلَ عَلَيْهِ. And this really shows us the importance of placing our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and relying upon Him, both with regards to current situations and events of the future, and also to have good thoughts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He mentions when the heart متى اعتمد القلب على الله, when the heart relies solely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَتَوَكَّلَ عَلَيْهِ, and it relies solely upon Allah, وَلَمْ يَسْتَسْلِمْ لِلْأَوْهَامِ وَلَا مَلَكَتْهُ الْخَيَالَاتِ السَّيِّئَةِ وَوَثِقَ بِاللَّهِ وَطَمَعَ فِي فَضْلِهِ وَاندَفَعَتْ عَنْهُ بِذَلِكَ الْهُمُومُ وَالْغُمُومُ. He mentions that when the heart solely relies upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and trusts in Allah and does not submit to his illusions and his imaginations, وَلَا مَلَكَةُ الْخَيَالَاتِ, and he is not controlled by his imagination and his evil thoughts, وَوَثِقَ بِاللَّهِ, and he trusts in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he desires Allah Azza wa Jal's bounties, اندفعت عنه بذلك الهموم والغموم, then grief and sorrow will be averted from the person. Grief and sorrow will be averted from the person. وزالت عنه كثير من الأسقام البدنية والقلبية. And he mentions that as a benefit, when the person does this, illnesses of the body and mental illnesses will be removed from the person. And this is a samara. This is it should be seen as a fruit and a benefit of placing your trust in Allah and relying upon Him solely subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَزَالَتْ أَنُّ كَثِيرٌ مِنَ الْأَسْقَامِ الْبَدَنِيَّةِ وَالْقَلْبِيَّةِ. Allah Azza wa Jal will remove from you illnesses of the body, physical illnesses, as well as illnesses which relate to the heart, and here it refers to mental illnesses. وحصل للقلب من القوة والانشراح والسرور ما لا يمكن التعبير عنه. And he mentions that the heart will feel a type of strength, وانشراح, and it will be at ease, it will be satisfied, والسرور, it will also experience joy, ما لا يمكن التعبير عنه, which is impossible to express. That the type of joy and happiness which the heart experiences when it does this, it is impossible to express. Then he mentions a very important point, and he says فَكَمْ مُلِئَتِ الْمُسْتَشْفَيَاتُ مِنْ مَرْضَى الْأَوْهَامِ وَالْخَيَالَاتِ الْفَاسِدَةِ. So he says, how many hospitals have become filled with people who have succumbed to their imaginations and their false illusions, right? Referring to mental illnesses, people who land up in mental institutions. Why? Because they've submitted to their false illusions and to their imaginary thoughts. And he mentions وَكَمْ أَثْرَتْ هَذِه الْأُمُورِ على قلوب كثير من الأقوياء فضلا عن الضعفاء. And how many people have been affected by this? He mentions people who are strong, right? People who are strong physically, فضلا عن الضعفاء, even more so those who are weak. And so despite the fact that in these times we have numerous means to achieve peace and to achieve relaxation, we find that mental illnesses are on the rise. For what reason? One scholar, he gives various reasons for this, and he says, firstly, ضعف التوكل, is that the person has weak trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The person, he did not expect the best from Allah Azza wa Jal with regards to his current situation and future events, and so the person submitted to his negative thoughts, and this overcame him. Why? Because he did not rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be sufficient for him as a disposer of his affairs. That's one reason. He mentioned secondly, al-istislam lil-wasawis. The person, he submits to the whisperings of shaitan. He submits himself to the whisperings of shaitan. And shaitan, he only orders us, and he promises us poverty, and he promises us situations of difficulty, and he wants us to believe that we will never ever get out of these situations. And so the person, he submits himself to this negative thinking and these illusions which he has in his mind, and this all comes about as a result of the whisperings of shaitan. Thirdly, the person does not busy himself with those things which are beneficial for him in his deen and his dunya. And so these are some of the reasons he mentions why people end up in the state. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal for protection. So he mentions, وَكَمْ أَثَرَتْ هَذِي الْأُمُورِ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ كَثِيرٍ مِنَ الْأَقْوِيَاءِ فَضْلًا عَنِ الدُّعَفَاءِ. So how many people were affected by this? He mentions, and their hearts were affected by this. Those who were strong, right? Those who we thought were physically strong people and mentally they were strong people. فَضْلًا عَنِ الدُّعَفَاءِ. Even more so, those who are weak. وَكَمْ أَدَّتْ إِلَى الْحُمْقِ وَالْجُنُونِ. And how many person reach the state of madness as a result of this. وَالْمُعَافَى مَنْ عَافَى اللَّهِ وَوَفَّقَهُ لِجِهَادِ نَفْسِهِ لِتَحْصِيلِ الْأَسْبَابِ النَّافِئَةِ الْمُقَوِّيَةِ لِلْقَلْبِ. And he says, Al-Mu'afa, the one who achieves a state of safety and a state of well-being from the situation is the one who Allah Azza wa Jal granted afiyah, and the one who Allah Azza wa Jal granted the ability to strive against himself and his evil thoughts to obtain the means, the beneficial means which strengthen his heart, and also Allah Azza wa Jal granted him the ability to avert from him his anxieties. He mentions, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. In Surah Al-Talaq verse 3, Allah mentions, وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. That whosoever places their trust solely in Allah and they rely and depend upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala solely, they will find that Allah Azza wa Jal is sufficient for them. And here Shaykh Abdul Rahman mentions, كافية جميع ما يهمه من أمر دينه ودنياه. That Allah Azza wa Jal will be sufficient as a disposer of this person's affairs with regards to all those things which concern him in relation to the matters of his deen firstly, and secondly in relation to matters of his dunya. That Allah Azza wa Jal is taking care of you currently, and Allah Azza wa Jal will take care of your future as well when you place your trust solely in Him and you take towards the prescribed means to ensure a good future. And so Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. And this gives strength to the heart. And there are many verses like this in the Quran where Allah Azza wa Jal drives across this meaning. He says, وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. Whosoever places their trust and relies upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala solely, Allah Azza wa Jal will make a way out for them from every difficulty. So in the previous chapter we mentioned a calamity strikes. A believer believes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make a way out for them. and they will not be in that situation forever. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ also mentions to us in a Sahih Hadith, and he says, لو أنكم تتوكلون على الله حق توكله لرزقكم كما يرزق الطير. He mentions that if you placed your trust and you relied upon Allah Azza wa Jal as you ought to rely upon Him, لرزقكم, He would have provided for you just as He provides for the bird. The bird leaves in the morning with an empty stomach and it returns with a full belly and a full stomach. But what does the bird do? The bird takes action. The bird makes effort. The bird leaves the nest. And so, if we place our trust in Allah Azza wa Jal as we ought to place our trust in Him, He will provide for us as He provides for the bird. And this, to summarize this point, it is the importance of tawakkul, the importance of tawakkul. The Shaykh then mentions فَالْمُتَوَكِّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ قَوِيُّ الْقَلْبِ لَا تُؤَثِّرُ فِيهِ الْأَوْهَامِ. He mentions that the mutawakkil, the one who places his trust in Allah, and this should be every Muslim, this person is qawiyul qalb. This person has a firm and he has a strong heart. لا تؤثر فيه الأوهام. He is not affected by his negative thoughts and by illusions which his mind makes up. ولا تزعجه الحوادث لعلمه أن ذلك من ضعف النفس. And he does not become troubled by events which is still to occur, because he knows that this is due to ضعف النفس. This is due to being in a weak state of mind, right? To become preoccupied with future events and to become troubled with them, it is something that emanates from a weak self. وَمِنَ الْخَوْرِ وَالْخَوْفِ الَّذِي لَا حَقِيقَةَ لَهُ. And this also comes about as a result of al-khawr, which is a weakness, wal-khawf, and a type of fear, الَّذِي لَا حَقِيقَةَ لَهُ, which has no reality, right? Becoming preoccupied with future events and fearing it is something that has no real reality, because we don't really know what will transpire. ويعلم مع ذلك أن الله قد تكفل لمن توكل عليه بالكفاية التامة. And the mutawakkil, the one who places his trust in Allah, he also knows that Allah Azza wa Jal has promised the one who places his trust in Him بالكفاية التامة, that Allah Azza wa Jal will dispose and take care of all of his affairs. فَيَثِقُ بِاللَّهِ. And so this person, he trusts in Allah. وَيَطْمَئِنُّ لِوَعْدِهِ. And he is also content and is at ease with the promise of Allah. Whosoever places their trust in Allah, Allah Azza wa Jalla will make out a way for them from every difficulty. And by way of this, فَيَزُولُ هَمَّهُ وَقَلْقَهُ. This person's grief and this person's anxiety will be removed. وَيَتَبَدَّلُ أُسْرَهُ يُسْرًا. وَيَتَبَدَّلُ أُسْرُهُ يُسْرًا. And his difficulty is replaced with ease. وَطَرْحُ فَرْحًا. And his grief becomes a means of happiness. وَخَوْفُ أَمْنًا. And his fear becomes a means of safety. And so the Shaykh concludes this point and he says, فَنَسْأَلُهُ تَعَالَى الْعَافِيَةِ. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal for afiyah, for well-being. وَأَن يَتَفَضَّلْ عَلَيْنَا بِقُوَّةِ الْقَلْبِ وَثَبَاتِ بِالتَّوَكُّلِ الْكَامِلِ الَّذِي تَكَفَّرَ اللَّهُ لِأَهْلِ بِكُلِّ خَيْرٍ وَدَفْءِ كُلِّ مَكْرُوهٍ وَضَيْرٍ. So he makes a dua and he says, we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to grant us a state of afiyah, a state of well-being, and that He يتفضل علينا بقوة القلب, and that He bestows upon us the strength of heart and a firm heart. وثبات بالتوكل الكامل, by placing our trust solely upon Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. الذي, the one, تكفر الله لأهلي بكل خير, the one whom Allah Azza wa Jal bestows upon all goodness. وَدَفَعَ كُلُّ مَكْرُوهٍ وَضَيْرٍ, and the one who He subhanahu wa ta'ala averts all forms of difficulty and hardship. So we end inshallah on this note with the dua of the Shaykh bi'idhnillah, and we continue next week bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We end on this note. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu.